credence to the story,
Right.
because if he said that's Yo Black Muslim Bakery, he named it Yo Black Muslim Bakery.
Well, he said, put it this way, he said Yo Black Muslim Bakery.
Yeah.
What it meant is something different.
Yeah.
Billy's emphasis was like, why you ask me to name your business? That's your Black Muslim. Why you ask me to name? That's you named it. That's what Billy's emphasis was.
But you gotta say that was a stroke of genius, though.
Oh yeah,
even the name Yo Black Muslim Bakery, like that was a stroke of genius. Like that there was a stroke of genius.
The Honorable Elijah Muhammad had a lot of genius. Even the book How to Eat to Live, that was the name of the book. His other book was.
No, I'm not saying I'm saying on the Yusuf Bey side. If somebody was like, man, that's Yo Black Muslim Bakery, and he was like, he named it Yo Black.
But we had another business, and we named it How to Eat to Live. It was on 7th Street. So we on at this time. The first mosque I was in was next to Castle Mount, where the church right now is. Pastor Reed.
Yeah,
that was our temple. It was a beautiful building. It was better than most buildings in the nation at that time. I found out later when I started traveling more what the buildings in the nation looked like, because many of them were started in the 40s and 50s. San Francisco had started in the 50s, and they actually had started in Oakland. That was what I found out recently. And it evidently was on West Oakland. I got a picture of it on my phone now, at 7th and Henry. It's a 2-story building. And Malcolm spoke there in 1962 or 1963. And somewhere along the line, I haven't found this out yet, who moved it to San Francisco? Because when I got there in 1969, it was on Fillmore, not the one on Gary, Fillmore and McAllister's, another block, up a few blocks up on Fillmore. And because we had a newer building, everybody, they wanted to compete with us. So they didn't buy it, they rented the space right on Fillmore and Gary. They had a restaurant below it. The mosque was upstairs. Used to be the Bill Graham's place where we had concerts at. And then right next to it was Jim Jones Church, was right next door to it. So we lasted about a year or 2 years next to Castlebar. Then we moved to right where the Ville is, 66 and East 14th. And there was an MB store where the little plaza is now, where the Fish King is. There was an MB store there. And our plan was to take that, turn it into a mosque, put a minaret on, put the crescent star on the top, all that. But somewhere within the next 6 months, I moved into the building, because we didn't have an FY house. We had another house, but they wanted people to live in the building because the Ville, was crazy then.
Yeah. It's still crazy.
But about 6 months later, they told me we bought a building in West Oakland. So we bought this building in West Oakland at the end of the lower bottom.
It's not the one on 8th and Pine.
8th and Pine. We bought that building in 1970.
Yeah, that's the Pine Street Lofts. Like that place is, they turned it into like a little artist place for like all these people rent, and they also artists at the same time.
That's a 2-story building also. The temple was upstairs. And so we moved in 72 or 73. And then Billy, first the minister in San Francisco got busted, meaning he lost his post. They say it was over some money that had something to do with some financing. And then Billy got fired. Joseph's brother, he said he cussed the national secretary out. His name was Abbas Rasul. And he lost his position. And then they sent people out here from the East Coast. And that's when John Fakir came out here from Buffalo, New York. That's Jabir's daddy.
I was about to say he related to Jabir. He did a lot with the prisons too, right? He was early chaplain. He
actually negotiated with Attica. He was during the Attica riots, which was the Attica uprising, what we call it, in 1971. He was one of the ministers who were going in because the brothers, who were prominent in the uprising, in the leadership, were from the Nation of Islam. So when they were negotiating, they had about 2 or 3 days of negotiation before the governor sent in, Rockefeller sent in the troops and, and shot up the people and killed, I think they killed 70 people, including some guards. But it was the Muslims, the brothers in the nation, who protected the guards. And the other prisoners wanted them to kill the guards. But the Muslims, their job was to protect them and make sure they wasn't killed. And some of the after the event was over, of course, some of the guards testified to that they would be dead if it wasn't for those guys who defended them with their own lives, because the other guys just wanted to kill them. But anyway, so Fakir was one of the people.
Before you get, I just want to say for everybody in the audience, what we talking about, some straight up authentic Oakland history right now. So if you haven't already shared, you need to share this on your platform, because Sheikh Abdur Rauf, he a humble brother, but you ain't gonna get this history everywhere. Like, how many people gonna be able to tell you the names of the ministers that negotiated in Attica? Like,
he's one of them. He wasn't the only one.
He wasn't one, but I'm saying he was one of them.
Right.
People don't even know, and like things become just straight up like, that Yusuf Bey's dad name was Theron, and he was the brother with the recipes.
Right.
Because I mean, anybody who in their 40s or older, they gonna know about, and they from Oakland, they gonna know about your Black Muslim bakery, because he be on TV, and that them fish sandwiches was legendary.
That's right. Yeah, he built a business. At one time, he had like 20 outlets.
No, I remember his number 17 was downtown Oakland, like downtown Oakland for number 17.
Right. So it might have been more than 20. But he had at least 20 outlets, because he had
and his stuff, like you said, was in the major health food stores. It was like
he had a outlet in the airport, in the Oakland airport, and at the Warriors game at the Coliseum.
You know what? So growing up, for me, I grew up post the death of Elijah Muhammad, and Imam W.D. Muhammad had kind of took over, and so when I was coming up, it was a lot of back and forth about what it means to be a Muslim, who's a Muslim and who's not. And so you had Yusuf Bey and Imam Fahim Shuaib. They have back-to-back television shows.
Well, at this time, let me tell you this. The television show was started by Nisa Islam, who eventually married Yusuf Bey. But she was a sister who used to be a secretary in the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's house. That was her claim. And that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad gave it the name. In the Nation of Islam, you couldn't just take an Arabic name.
Yeah.
That was considered a holy name. And it was only after a long period of development that name would come to you, and it had to be given by Elijah Muhammad. If you had a name, for instance, there were some brothers who came from other movements like the Ahmadi movement, and they already had a name. People wouldn't call them that name. They would call them like my name. I came in, my name was Donald Hazard. So when I got my X, I became Donald X. But because there was another brother named Donald there before me, I became Donald 2X. Okay.
Because it was two of you guys in Oakland.
He was Donald X, I was Donald 2X. The next Donald after me would be Donald.
But that was just in this area. It wasn't like
no, that's at your mosque. At my mosque in San Francisco, they had
They had their own.
They had James 67X in San Francisco, because they had been there since 1950 in the 1950s.
Yeah.
So those numbers had continued to rise. So they had started in San Francisco. Somebody moved in Oakland at 7th and Henry. This is the research that I just recently have kind of confirming again. But who took them over there, I haven't discovered yet.
So why did they keep the name B?
No, they didn't keep B.
I mean, why did they get the name 26?
We got B because Honorable Elijah Muhammad knew he had another mosque in Oakland that he put here.
So that's why he was like, it's the movement y'all started here.
Right.
So if y'all get another number, it's gonna erase that history that y'all started on Henry Street. It's gonna
it's like in New York. Temple number 7 was where Malcolm was the minister, and then later Farrakhan. but they had 7A, 7B, 7. They had 7. They had 7 with about F because they kept getting outlets, different places.
Yeah.
So that kind of spoke to the fact that you are outlet, not you're the main temple. That's why we didn't like it. So for years we kept saying we wanted another number. So we're in 7 in 1973. We in West Oakland. 1974, John Fakir comes out. February 1975, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad returns to Allah. He died the day before we're going to the convention in Chicago. I only saw him 6 times in my life in person. And that was every year I would go to Chicago, but that's the only time he would speak because he was sickly all the time. He had bronchial pneumonia and asthma, and he was always having these bouts of medical issues. And then even that year that he died, they kept saying that he's a lot better now. But still, he died the day before the convention. We on our way to the convention. And we in Missouri, I heard it from a Caucasian guy on the radio, the leader of the Black Muslim died today. We said, man, turn that thing out, that devil's lying. We wouldn't believe it, you know. But then we got Chicago.
How did Imam W.D. Muhammad end up after that happened in Chicago?
He died the day before we're there. And when we got there, we don't know what's going to go on. We realized that he had died because people in the line are talking about it, but we don't know what it's going to be or what's going to happen. What had happened, Imam Muhammad had been excommunicated. Of course, you know, with Malcolm in 64, when Malcolm got excommunicated, they also excommunicated Imam Muhammad because Malcolm said he got the verification that Elijah Muhammad had children by women that weren't his known wives. All we knew his wife was Clara Muhammad. So that's what I'm saying, known wives. And Malcolm said that he had children by young secretaries that he had. And he said, he asked Wallace Muhammad, he verified it. He said he would have killed anybody who told him that because he would say that was a lie that the media put out. But he said because he got it from his son, he knew it had to be the truth. And he kept it until he, started publicizing it after, the situation with his family. They bombed his house and all these things happened. So he began to put that out there in the media, the real reason why he left the Nation of Islam. But he got excommunicated. Also, Imam Muhammad was excommunicated. But Malcolm kept using it as a tool to discredit the nation, of course, because the people in the nation were saying that's a lie. And eventually, of course, what happened, Imam Muhammad, he had a strange history. He was Elijah Muhammad's 7th child. He was born in 1933. And when his mother was pregnant, Elijah Muhammad's teacher, Fard Muhammad, told her, you're going to have a boy, name him. And he wrote his name on the back porch of the door, the back door. This is a story. It might be apocryphal, but this is a story that all Muslims who've been around know. That he wrote his name, and the name he wrote was Wallace. This is one of his names. This is one of Fard Muhammad's names. His name was Wallace Fard Muhammad. W.F. Muhammad on the FY uniform. You see W.F. Muhammad. He used these names, but Wallace was, so he actually named the child after him. And Elijah Muhammad was saying, well, this man is divine. This man is, God came in the person of this man. That was the language of the nation. Allah came in the person of Fard Muhammad. Didn't say Allah that he was Allah, except for some of us said that. But the technical language is Allah came in the person of Fard Muhammad. And so basically, Wallace Muhammad was named after, and also Fard told Elijah Muhammad, this is the son who's going to help you. So he had this strange prediction and this guy's name over him his whole life. And people knew this. So he was a kind of strange guy. And,
so I was asking, how did he end up coming? Because I know for some time he was the imam in Oakland. So I know like a lot.
But that's a different time. I'm about to put you in the time. You way ahead of it. You behind. Okay. You're out of sequence. I'm talking about, this is 1974 when 1975, Elijah Muhammad died.
Yeah.
People I had never seen Wallace Muhammad. I just heard this story about him and knew about him. I knew had been excommunicated with Malcolm. And I read, of course, the autobiography. Malcolm says complimentary things about him, that he always respected his spiritual insights. He also said that he told him, Malcolm wrote Wallace Muhammad a letter when he was on Hajj, among the people he wrote, and saying that he agrees with him that the Nation of Islam chance of survival would be only secured if they had a better understanding of Orthodox Islam. This is his conversation with Malcolm over the years, in addition to that statement, which, Malcolm was killed not too long after that. But at any rate, so he had been excommunicated with Malcolm. Malcolm got killed in 1965. Imam Muhammad becomes the minister in, well, actually, he was the minister in 1960 in Philadelphia. So, which may account for Philadelphia. And at that time, he was saying things that the other ministers didn't agree with. But because he had this strange prediction on him, he was allowed to do some things that somebody else probably wouldn't survive because of it. Because they said, this guy is the one who is going to help his father. Even Malcolm's, if you read Malcolm's book, read the book called by this African, he did a PhD thesis, his name S.M. Udom. The book was called Black Nationalism. So he was given access to the Nation of Islam during that time. Elijah Muhammad allowed him to come around, be at the meetings, be at his dinner table, write the history, and you'll see that Malcolm at that time said the leader after Elijah Muhammad was going to be Wallace Muhammad. It was like common knowledge among the people who had been around.
What's I was at this program at MCA, and the guy who was there, it was after that documentary came out. He actually played the documentary about who killed Malcolm X.
Oh, this last
one.
So
one of the guys who was in the documentary, I think he might be Pakistani or Caribbean or something, but he actually played audio from 1958 or 1959 or something, and it was at the time Minister Wallace Muhammad, at the time they was calling him, he was teaching the people at Mosque number 7 in the 50s, the late 50s. He was teaching them how to make salat. I'm saying that to agree with you, saying exactly. He was doing things that other people wasn't doing.
That's what I'm saying. And so, but periodically his father he'd have so many complaints against him by some of the upper ministers that his father would excommunicate. He got excommunicated 3 times. Yeah. So when I came in, he was out. He was excommunicated. But he came back in 1964 when Elijah Muhammad got gravely sick, and he started going talking to the leaders. And if you remember what Imam Al-Amin said in his talk last couple of weeks ago at the Berkeley, he said he was telling the people that he was going to be the leader then. The leaders, he was telling the leaders, but they weren't telling us, the common people. But some of it was leaking out, but more of that was on the. And so on that day that Elijah Muhammad died, the next day was this big meeting, and all the major leaders, the Nation of Islam was broken up in like 7 regions, 6 or 7 regions. And each of them had a head. Farrakhan was the head of one. There was a leader in the Southwest. There was a leader on the Eastern Seaboard. There was a leader in the Midwest. There was a leader in Atlanta. The West Coast was A.K. Hassan, who's still there now. And they all came up and they pledged, and Muhammad Ali spoke, Jesse Jackson spoke. And but they all pledged their allegiance, if you want to call it in the day's language. They gave bay'ah to the new leader, which was Wallace Muhammad. He was sitting, I couldn't even see him because he was sitting down on the floor or something, and they were all turning around, like pointing back to him. And so they all agreed that he would be the leader that day. This is the day, a few hours after his father died. But it wasn't the first time that they had heard it. They knew the story. They knew, and for the last year or so, he was going throughout the the Nation of Islam population, speaking to the leaders, telling them this is what's going to happen. And so when Elijah Muhammad died, he became the leader. Now, some people, because Farrakhan, of course, he was the golden boy, he had the silver tongue and what have you. Some people might have thought it was going to be Farrakhan. Other people thought it was Jeremiah Shabazz, who was the most productive minister in the community. He was from Philadelphia. His name was Jeremiah Shabazz. They sold more. We were selling 1 million Muhammad Speaks a week, 1 million. We were paying for it, put it that way. Sometimes the brothers was giving away, but we were getting the money to pay for 1 million a week. 250,000 was being sold in Philadelphia, or being paid for in Philadelphia. So they had a outsized influence over the money coming in, the people coming to the mosque, all that. Philadelphia was most active. New York was the brightest because Malcolm had been there. Farrakhan now is there. He's the national spokesman and so he had the oratory, he had the mic. The brother in Philadelphia wasn't a good speaker. He was just a good producer. His name was Jeremiah Shabazz. And so some people thought it was him. He was going to be the leader because of his production. But in the end, of course, it was Imam Muhammad. He became the leader that day. His first talk, he gave a talk from the Quran on Surah 75, the resurrection. And beautiful, you can get it online. You can get it in 1975. And so he indicated in the talk that the community was going to be evolving, right? And he said, anybody who can find a likeness among us is welcome among us. You know, within a few months, of course, the word went out that, oh, white people can be Muslims now, could be, you know, this guy. So he started making changes from the first talk in subtle ways. And then later on, of course, when he got interviewed by the media and what have you, what's going to be your program? He said, okay, well, anything that agrees with the Quran that we're doing, I'm going to keep. And anything that disagrees with the Quran, we're going to eliminate it. But of course, he couldn't do it all at once. So he had his system of how he was going to do this. And he first started changing the name, Nation of Islam. I think by 6 months, we had changed the name from the Nation of Islam to the World Community of Islam in the West. And then maybe another year, we changed the name again. 4 or 5 years later, he changed the name again. So he gave
So when I was young, I remember for a while it was called AMCOP, but I don't remember what it stood for.
American, no, that's AMCOP.
AMCOP.
That was an organization that we had of collective buying. We were buying goods in bulk. That was called AMCOP.
I just remember when I was young, I was like, wait a minute, this is called I Am a Cop?
Oh, okay.
Hey, Sheikh, but before we get that, I want to really touch on how long was you in Sudan? Because I don't want to run out of time.
We already gonna run out of time.
How did you end up going to Sudan?
Okay, Sudan. 1987, a friend of mine who used to be at our mosque, he transferred to 85 or something. He transferred to Falls Church, Virginia. He worked at airlines. And so he joined the community there. Falls Church, Virginia has one of the most, probably the richest Muslim community in America, and one that had the most so-called scholarly institutions. So there was an institution there called IIIT, International Institute for Islamic Thought. And so they were progressive, and they were mostly doctors and law. But these guys were, well, I would say guys, these men were a little different. They were not only academically advanced, they were also Islamically advanced. They were people who knew the religion, not just people who had academic credentials. And so they had this program called the Islamization of knowledge. They wanted to Islamize all knowledge. So, you know, they had big ideas, and they were doing, and so they was thinking out the box about a lot of things. And of course, they realized that the converts here in America, they were older. They were older people. Whereas the schools in Saudi Arabia, they don't want you if you're old. They want you at 16 and 17 so they can feed you, they can grow you up how they want to grow you. You know, they don't want you to be married, none of that. They want you to be a student, focus on your education. So they developed a program where, because people were converting to Islam, and they had other responsibilities. They had families, they had jobs, they had all these other things. So they developed a program where they're going to send older students to study in the Sudan. Not only were we going to send the students, they were going to send their families with them. You couldn't go to school at King Abdulaziz University or Qura in Mecca or Medina University if you had a family. Basically, you couldn't go, you know. So they developed this program, and there were people who had converted to Islam from different religions and what have you. And so my friend, he was there. He was in this community, and he was a little bit critical of them because they didn't go out and do street dawah, you know. And they said, "Oh, Salim, you got to go and you got to learn the religion. We're going to send you to Malaysia." So he called me one day and said, "Man, they're going to send me to Malaysia to study Islam. To study Arabic, you know." So, wow, I wish I can go, you know. I had already made Hajj. I made Hajj in 1980. And then when I made Hajj, the brothers who had helped us the most early on in the language, learning Arabic, the rudiments of Arabic, trying to read the Quran, they were Sudanese brothers. They went to our mosque, and they were Sudanese brothers. And one of the brothers, his father's a big Sufi sheikh in the Sudan, and all of them they were very, very humble brothers, but they were well grounded in the religion. And so I always dreamed of going to Sudan. They would always say, "Come to Sudan, you can come." You know, Sudan's a poor country. You go there, you know, you live in. So but I still was trying to go. And so one day he told me, well, they changed. The brother in Falls Church, he called me and said, "Man, now they're going to send me to Sudan." I said, "Wow, I really wish I can go." And then maybe about a month later, he called me and said, "You know, some of the people who were supposed to have been going, they canceled. And they asked me that I know anybody would be interested in going. You want to go?" I said, "Yeah, I want to go." So I called the people up, and I told them I had 4 children, what have you, and my wife, of course. They said they would take everybody.
Allahu Akbar.
So I signed up. I only had like a month to get ready because it was on short notice. And then about 2 weeks later, he calls me and said, "Hey man, somebody else canceled. You know anybody want to go?" I called Enrique Rashid and asked him. At that time, he had 2 children. And so we plugged them into it. So me and my 4 children, Enrique, his 2 children, Salim, he had 2 children. Another brother who had just finished his PhD at Michigan, he was a Pakistani brother named Abdullah Al-Hassan. So we all went to Sudan to this school called the Markaz Al-Islami Afriki, which is the African Islamic Center. It was in English. They call it the Markaz. Markaz means the center.
Yeah.
So we went there for 1 year, and the program was only for the brothers. It's all men's school. And when we got there, then we start. Well, there was another group there that came from New York, who had a program that they had arranged for children, and these children were like from the 5, 6 years old to like 14. There were maybe about 10 or 15 of them. And they had some kind of connection. I wasn't really sure how they made the connection. And some of these brothers were former members of the Nation of Islam. Many of them come from the Dar community. And the children were the children of some of the imams in the Dar. You know, so they sent their children to take advantage of this program too. And so when we discovered they had this program, we asked, could our children go? One of my children was 2 or 3. He couldn't go, and one was 5. So they were too young, but they let my 2 oldest join it. They were like 7 and 9. And then later we complained that we wanted our sisters to have an opportunity to study too. And so they developed a class for our sisters. And so our sister was able to go. We would go in the daytime, and they would get about 3 hours at night. But we'd be there from like 8 in the morning to like 2 o'clock.
So you would go in at 8 in the morning and you would go to 2, and it was an Arabic intensive, or did you do
Arabic intensive? Arabic intensive. It was Islam and Arabic, but the focus was on the language, of course. It was done all in Arabic, and these guys were excellent presenters, excellent teachers. I mean, they knew the religion, and they knew how to. Well, the school itself was a school that was predicated on teaching the Arabic language to Africans who didn't speak the language. So these at the school, there or people who didn't speak the language, mostly Africans. So for the African countries like that spoke Portuguese, they were there. Or that spoke French, they were there. The Senegalese were there. And hardly none of the students were Sudanese. The Southern Sudanese were there because they prefer to speak, you know, their native language. Yeah, and those people were there. They prefer to speak that. They spoke Arabic, but they didn't know Arabic. You know, so we just fit in with them, and they had a system of being able to teach non-Arabic speakers the language, even though, you know, their native language. Some of them knew their native language. Many of them spoke Swahili, and many of the Sudanese teachers spoke Swahili in addition. And of course, the British colonized the Sudanese, so most of them spoke English, and then of course some of them spoke French too. So it was a wonderful experience for a year. So at the end of the year, we're doing the year. Of course, we finished the course, but we still weren't satisfied. We said, well, we want to extend it, and they said, well, it was an experimental program for a year, and we argued with them, and they said, okay, if you guys stay, we will go another year. But if you go back home, we're not going to bring you back because my plane tickets cost like $40,000. Something.
Yeah.
Just so that was a big expense in the budget they had. That's what we were told, at least. And so we ended up having, and plus, Enrique took a sabbatical on his job for a year. Salim took a sabbatical for his job for a year. I was self-employed, so it didn't make a difference to me. My wife worked at Mervyn's at his department store, and they told her if she leaves, she had to start all over. She wasn't going to get no seniority. And so she decided she would go. And then the brother, Muhammad Al-Hassan, he was going for professorship at University of Malaysia. So we couldn't stay for that year because of that consideration. So we came back here. When I went the first time, of course, I rented my house out to someone and they were paying my rent. So this time I wanted to go back on my own and without taking my family. So it took me about a year and a half to save enough money because now I have to pay the house.
Pay rent. Yeah, you gotta pay the mortgage.
Family to be here. So it took me about a year and a half to get it together. I did this and that. And then I was able to go back again for a year by myself.
Allahu Akbar.
So I went and stayed in. This time I stayed in the dormitory, which was better because, if you stay with your family,
you're gonna be speaking English at the
You're gonna argue in English. Yeah. You ain't gonna be trying to say MF in Arabic. so that was, but it was good when my children, we were able to go to Egypt. We stayed in Egypt for about 3 or 4 weeks. We made Umrah by boat. We went from Port Sudan by boat and made Umrah. And so my children got a chance to experience that. And so it was great.
How long passed between the 2 times you went? You went in 87 and then
87 to 88, and then I went back. Sudan they had Inqilab, they had a revolution in 1989. I came back in 1990, and they had a new government, Omar Bashir. They came in 1990. Yeah. And so everything was different. The school changed names from the Marcus Islamic Center because the Saudis supported the Marcus. They were the main contributors to it. But when I came back, the Saudis had cut off their support of it because this was a revolutionary government. They was having, they were doing revolutionary stuff, supposedly, at that time. So they changed the name to the World Islamic University. And so it became a university. It was called a African Center when I was there the first time. The next time I went back, it was called World Islamic University. And so I did the year there, and a lot of stuff was going on in 1990, and I came back in 91.
So it was tougher with the new year, the second time, just because of the turmoil. Did that have an effect?
It was a more advanced class. I mean, we kept
No. I'm saying just with the societal changes.
Yeah, they were trying to get the Sudanese. They were trying to get the Sudanese to change their culture, because the Sudanese have a real lackadaisical culture. You know, you want to try to get something done. You know, you want to get your passport because you're leaving. You know, and you go to the passport office. They in there drinking tea. You know, 10 o'clock, everybody's drinking tea. You ain't gonna get nothing done at 10 o'clock. You can forget about it. I don't care what it is. You can be the president, and then they leave at 2 o'clock to go home for the end of the day. So I mean, you know, so they were trying to do things like make them work at different times of hours and try to make the students. We were already going to camps in the outlying areas, working with the people in the rural areas, Dawa camps and stuff like that. But you know, we said, man,